LeaderCast.
This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
When you're coming into an organization as the leader, the first step has to be to learn the business. And in order to learn the business, you got to listen to the people.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It is another beautiful day here in North Carolina, and I'm enjoying a hot cup of coffee from our friends at the Salty Sailor Coffee Company. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand and is the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Listeners get 10% off their amazing selection of fresh roasted coffee by going to saltysailorcoffee.com and entering the code DEEP at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by our other sponsors, Leader Connect, Ignite Management Services, and Liberty Strength. All these sponsors help me bring these shows to you each and every week, so I highly encourage you to click on their links below and check them out. Now, in this episode of the Deep Leadership Podcast, I sit down with Brian Lillie, a United States Air Force veteran and transformational leader with extensive C-suite experience in the technology industry. Brian shares insights on his journey from the military to becoming CEO, discussing how military and sports have helped shape his leadership style. One of the ways we get better as a leader is to learn from other successful leaders, and this conversation will give you a perspective of what it takes to truly make a difference as a leader. Now, I love this discussion, and I know you will as well. So are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Brian Lillie. Brian is a United States Air Force veteran and a globally recognized transformational leader with more than 20 years of C-suite experience in the technology space. Brian wears many hats. He's been known as Coach Lillie for the past 18 years and is a former all-star pitcher for the Giants Fantasy Camp Leagues. Brian was pursuing a PhD in leadership from Pepperdine University before he was recruited to join Rackspace as their new president. I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about how the military and sports have helped him to become a highly successful C-suite leader. So, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. It's great to have another military veteran leader on the show because I'm going to learn a lot from your experience, and I'm sure we have some common stories as well. But let's get started off with you got recruited into Rackspace as president. So tell us what you do at Rackspace and what that company does.
Sure. Thanks for asking. So I'm the president of the private cloud business unit at Rackspace. We're the business unit's about $1.2 billion in revenue, about 3,000 employees, and we drive private cloud deployments for everybody from commercial customers, mom and pop shops, all the way up to global enterprises. And these are typically deployments that support either sovereign or highly regulated environments or really applications that haven't been refactored for the public cloud, or there's just other reasons why it makes sense to run those workloads in a private cloud. Because as a company, we do both private, public, and AI, and we run those workloads where they're best suited. And so when we talk to clients, they may put a part of their workloads in the public cloud, like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, and then they say, but these workloads we want to keep private, but we want to connect the two, and we want services on top of that. And so we offer those services, whether it's a VMware-based cloud, an OpenStack-based cloud, and we co-invented OpenStack with NASA, which is an alternative to VMware. And now, with containers and Kubernetes, sort of the more modern application stack, we've moved into that as well. And so we have a global presence, 34 data centers all around the world, and I think it's a privilege to serve in this role.
That's fantastic. I mean, you have a lot of responsibility, big company, right? So what I want to do is kind of go back a little bit. How has, your time in the military, you're in the Air Force, and really the amount of time you spent in athletics, both playing and coaching, how has that impacted your approach towards leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I start back a ways, I grew up in a family. My real last name is O'Connell. Lillie is an adopted name because my father died when I was very young, and my mom remarried, and I became a Lillie. I played sports my entire life, and I was a good student, but we didn't have a lot of money, so. The Air Force said, "Hey, we can help you pay for college." I got a scholarship, and I went off to college. And so, to me, it's an honor and a privilege. People say, "Thank you for your service," and I say, "Thank you for the opportunity to serve the country and for what you've given me." Because they paid for my undergraduate. I said, "Okay, I owe them 4 years." I came in and I served the first 4 years in Space Technology Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and working on space technology experiments to serve the Air Force satellite program. Worked with NASA, got to meet the astronauts, climb on the shuttle, do stuff that any 23, 24-year-old young LT would love. And then as I moved into space operations, classified space operations, and they said, "Hey, I said, I was still a young captain. And I said, it's time to start working on my master's degree. Well, guess what? The Air Force helped me with that. Got a Master of Science in Telecom, and really ended up becoming the commander of the communications squadron there at Onizuka Air Station, named after astronaut Ellison Onizuka, who died in the Challenger accident. And I got to my first job as a commander at about 28 years old, about 130 purple-suited organization, doing comms, classified comms, and computers all around the region, based in the Silicon Valley, actually in Sunnyvale at the Blue Cube. But I had people in England and people in the Indian Ocean. So as a young captain, commander, it was still, in my opinion, the best job I ever had. And it was a really tough decision. In '96, I had a family member fall ill. I wanted to stay close to him, my brother, and so we got out of the service. I've been married 35 years. I always tell my wife, I make the big decisions, you make the small ones. It's fortunate that in 35 years, there's never been one big decision. So I asked her, and she said, "You know what? Let's go what do what you think is right." And I said, I can serve in the reserves and get out and start my technology career. So that's sort of that military preparation to get into technology, and the lessons are vast. The mission comes first. The people may be second, but you can't accomplish the mission without the people, and you've got to really lead authentically. You've got to lead from the front, from behind, from the side, wherever you're needed. There's so many lessons that I took from the military into my tech career and board service. I'm on boards now. And when I think about the military and athletics and coaching athletics, and then just coaching in general, there's no I in team. I mean, it's an old adage, but it's so true. Teams can accomplish everything, but you've got to set a North Star. You've got to be very clear of the vision. You got to be very clear of expectations. You got to set goals. And then when you achieve them, you reward success and you celebrate as a team. There's so many. I've won championships on teams I've been on teams I've coached, and I've been dead last. And there's lessons from both. Yes. So I think what a rich, and I'm so grateful and thankful for that preparation for the roles I'm in now and have been in.
It's interesting. I have a good friend of mine is a former college lacrosse coach, and we talk a lot about leadership. And he says the one difference between maybe a leader and a coach is that, and I think leaders can learn from coaches from this respect, is that you recruit the team, you train up the team, you work on plays, but then you step off the field and you let your people do what they've been trained to do. And I think often we leaders tend to get too much involved with the day-to-day sometimes, and we don't let our people do things naturally. So sometimes we need to learn that lesson from a coach and take a step off that field and let the players play. And I think that's a powerful lesson he taught me, for sure.
I think that is spot on. It's, in fact, when I took a little break from work back in 2019 and I was wandering the world, I walked the Camino de Santiago and I was doing a lot of thinking, and I missed being on the field. I missed being a player. In fact, I talk about player coach. And, if you're on a board, it's kind of like you're in the grandstand saying, hey, coach, go left. And the coach is the CEO, right? And that's even more removed. So you have to be sure. One thing I did learn, you have to be sure that when you say you're done, you're really done. And that you're hanging up your cleats, for good. And that you're moving into that coaching role or that management role where you're not on the field, but your job is to create the conditions where your team can succeed. And so it is the talent you recruit. It's the tools you give them. It's the elimination of roadblocks. It's all those things, but you're not coding. You're not configuring routers. You're not setting up storage arrays. Your team is. And it's really, really pronounced in tech where you literally can't do what your team is doing. When you reach levels, you can't do it. And so the only way is to be an enabler. And it really forced me to look at, really, in fact, I had a coach once who said this, John. She said, okay, what are the three core things? And I said, well, people need a North Star, like, Proverbs, without vision, the people perish. And then I said something else, I said, and then I can do anything. And she looked at me and she goes, really? Or do you mean I can lead anything? And it hit me at that moment. She's right. Like, I am not, of course I want to add value and do some things that management do. But at the end of the day, the mission is being carried out by the people. And so it's really about leadership. And it just, from that day on, it really hit me that I'm the enabler, I'm the helper, I'm the leader. I can set the vision, but at the end of the day, the team's doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And especially, like you said, in a tech space where the jobs are that complicated, you have to be there to make sure your team has what they need for success, and remove roadblocks, set direction, and absolutely. And it's interesting to see that you learned those lessons in the military. You've learned it on the playing field, and now you're applying it in a large organization, which is phenomenal. Well, one of the things I was reading through some of your materials, you say your mantra is listen, learn, and then lead. And I really like that idea. Could you talk us through why that's important to you?
Yes. And I have to give attribution. My former boss, the CEO of Equinix back in the day, who's a West Pointer, by the way, played football at West Point as well, recruited me to come to Equinix as his CIO. And Steve Smith and I talked about this. And, because when you're coming into an organization as the leader, I've seen leaders come in and exemplify the opposite of this. They immediately take charge. They immediately start directing and edicting, and they apply what they did at their last job or 2 jobs ago to what clearly they need to do here, where, the first step has to be to learn the business. And in order to learn the business, you got to listen to the people. So when I had this conversation with Steve back in 2008, I came in, and the first 2.5 weeks, I met 75 people. I wrote them all down. And these were people in IT, people in the various functions, people in Europe, in Asia. I wanted to gain perspective. And oh my gosh, those 75 conversations created the foundation of success in my mind, because for a couple of reasons. One, I learned the business. Just having those conversations and learning what was working, what wasn't working, where we really could differentiate ourselves, where we have real risks. So I listened to 75 different people and I learned the business. And then I would also say that, which isn't in the listen, learn, lead, it's really an underpinning of the leadership, is I gained relationships, which is the beginning of followership. And I can still pick up the phone and call many of those people. When I get a job here, they reach out interested in, hey, are there any openings there? It's a powerful mantra process of following, of being an informed leader versus a leader that's coming in by force of will. And sometimes you have to abbreviate it because, of the burning platform that you're taking over. But in my mind, just like my mom said, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Start with listening, learn, really listen. So it's active listening, learn, and then you can start to offer leadership that's informed and frankly inspired.
I love that. That's such a great best practice. Get a chance to talk to your teams, understand them, build relationships, understand where the key issues are, where the opportunities are, and then now you sort of have like the cheat code to get started as a leader. By actually talking to the people, which is what consultants often do. They come in, they talk to the people, and then they have a solution. Well, you can actually do that as the leader as well, and so it's good to hear that you've employed that technique as well. I'm curious, we faced a lot of uncertainty, here, last 5 years, 6 years. We've had financial crisis, pandemics, we've had elections, we have politics. How do you and how should leaders be leading through uncertainty? What have you found that works best for you and your teams?
Wow, that's the question of the last 5 years, isn't it?
It is.
I put a couple of books here. They're pretty dog-eared, the Enchiridion Meditations. I discovered Stoicism and Stoic philosophy. Admiral Stockdale, one of the most incredible essays I've ever read was about the lessons of Epictetus, which Admiral Stockdale wrote back when he was a prisoner in Vietnam. And he tells this story that, I'll leave it for you to read the essay, but that's when I discovered I didn't know really who, Epictetus was or that he taught Marcus Aurelius or, who Seneca was or Musonius Rufus or basically these Stoic philosophers. And I would say that over the last 5 years, more than that, but over the last 5 years, I've employed more Stoicism than, and Stoicism, I think it's a misnomer. Stoicism doesn't mean not having feeling, which, people could say, oh, that person is so stoic. This is more, a philosophy about, if I were to summarize it, it's really about control what you can control. And you really have to let the rest go. And I remember I had a coach once, she told me, when something happens to you, there's an external stimulus that comes to you. There's a glorious space between that stimulus and your reaction. And it's in that moment that you can kind of be your best self based on your reaction and how you react, how you manage that situation, how you manage those emotions, especially on emotional or difficult topics, is to me a really big part of leadership. And so, there could be fire all around, the ship's going down, whatever metaphor you want to use, companies, going bankrupt or there's a tragedy or whatever, you can feel and you should feel, but your reaction and what you can control should be limited to that, what you can control. And I think over these last few years, it's really been important to remember that. And, there's I've now conversed with him. I've talked with him. There's a writer of the Daily Stoic, which is there's a podcast and a website and all that. And Ryan Holiday I told him that I've been so inspired by reading not only the classics, but the books that he's written, like Obstacle is the Enemy, Ego is the Enemy. How true is that? That how often does your own ego get in the way of leading? If it's got to be all about you and your ego. So ego is the enemy. And another name of a book he's written is Obstacle is the Way. And he talks about how these obstacles can become fuel for the fire, and, just about perseverance and overcoming hardship and all those things. So I think that these last few years, like in this difficult time, we can't control, the world pandemic. We couldn't control that, but we certainly could control our response to it. We couldn't, control the inequality or the discord that's in our country, but we can contribute to the good, and we can lead from the front, and we can lead by example. And so the things that I can control, I've really worked hard, because I wasn't always that way, John, to be honest. I'm a pretty fired up guy, pretty active guy, athletic, competitive, all those things. But at the end of the day, you also just have to try and remain in balance, and to be authentic, and to live with this control what you can control, and contribute where you can contribute, and be the example.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
As a leader, you're responsible for the mission and the people assigned to you. Regardless of the size of your team, employees are depending on you for their lives and careers. For the sake of your team and the people who entrust you with this role, you need to master the skills to become a great leader. Best-selling leadership author John Rennie is proud to introduce the Qualified Leadership book series. This new series teaches you how to become a people-centered leader. Great leaders know that employees who are respected, appreciated, and allowed to grow will go the extra mile. These books provide real-world leadership wisdom written from a hands-on perspective. If you want to be a more effective leader, this is the one book series you should read this year. This 3-book series contains the following best-selling leadership books: I Have the Watch, You Have the Watch, and All in the Same Boat, for one low price of $39.99. Begin your journey to become a leader worth following. Go to johnsrennie.com and get your order in today.
This episode is brought to you by Leader Connect, a leadership training company and video platform founded by the leadership book author and Deep Leadership Podcast guest, Neil Jerd. Leader Connect is a video and podcast streaming platform for leaders and teams. Watch it alone or as a team, and each video supports you and your team, allowing you to improve performance and build a great culture. Join hundreds of experts and learn about leadership, planning, public speaking, team building, mindfulness, and a range of other subjects that will help you lead well and build a great team. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the experts on this platform. Leader Connect is offering a 10% discount to all Deep Leadership listeners. Go to leader-connect.co.uk and enter the code DEEP at checkout. Master your leadership with Leader Connect. This episode is brought to you by Ignite Management Services. Ignite is led by Mike Watson, who you might remember from episode 137. Mike and his team believe that everything starts with leadership, whether it's strategy execution or cultural transformation. It's the role of the leader to create the conditions for their people to succeed. The team at Ignite can help you develop critical habits to enhance your leadership capability and transform your business. Ignite Management is now offering the Resilient Leadership Assessment Tool. This is an online questionnaire designed to assess and guide leadership development, coaching, and team building. It provides leaders an opportunity to gain insights into their leadership strengths and development needs. After taking this assessment, you will receive a custom, detailed report that provides practical and actionable recommendations to enhance your effectiveness. I have taken this assessment myself and found it to be extremely valuable in helping me make changes to my leadership approach. Right now, Ignite is offering 15% off the price of this tool to the Deep Leadership audience. Go to ignitemanagement.ca and enter the code START15 at checkout to get started today.
That makes a lot of sense. I use the analogy, when because my first deployment in the Navy was in the winter in the North Atlantic. And so we had tremendous storms, winter storms. And I remember almost everybody on the sub was seasick, and everyone to a person, even if they were senior enlisted or whatever, they were all looking to the captain to see if he had it, right? If he started panicking, we would start panicking, right? Because this ship was getting tossed about, like we were in a washing machine. It was nuts. And I remember every eye was on the captain. And is he panicking? He never panicked. He maintained, as you said, a stoic, approach, control what he could control, do what he could do to get us into a safer conditions. And again, it's a great example of that because every eye is on the leader when those situations happen. And if you panic, it's very contagious. So it's not good.
It's not good. And it's in the crisis. That's where I think the military was so excellent in training us for these leadership roles, because I used to say, I would sometimes get questioned on why I put the mission first. I had a statement that said the mission first, people second. And they were like, wait a minute. You're a people person. I don't understand that. And I said, well, let me give you an example. You're commanding a set of personnel, and you've been told by the general you need to go into this valley and attack the enemy. And just let you know, we know the enemy's on both sides. They're going to come down. They're going to cut your team in two, and you're probably going to take a lot of casualties. But what you need to know is when that happens, we're going to envelop them and we're going to win the war. We're going to win the battle. And, the person says, no, sir, I can't do it. I can't, because I'm putting my people first. And so then the next person comes up and says, yes, sir, I'll take the command. And what they do is they lead from the front. They lead with, and the things that they can control are, you set the parameters to be as successful as you can, but you've got to accomplish the mission. And so when I think about the example you just gave, and this example that they taught us at Squadron Officer School, we fortunately, and I've had this conversation with my team, I've told them that story, and I said, fortunately, we're not talking about losing lives, but the equivalent is there are going to be times where I'm going to ask you to stay because we have a database down and a customer suffering, or we have an outage, or there's a data center fire, or whatever it is. And guess what? I'm going to ask you to support the mission, and it's your son's birthday, but guess what? I'm going to be right there with you, and it's the mission has to be first, but how you approach that is, in these crazy times, is control the things you can control, set the team up for success, and be right there with them leading from the front. And that's, your captain's story is a great example of that.
Yeah, I think when I was introducing you as a transformational leader, I think transformational leadership is about the mission and the people. And I think that's a lot of people have embraced servant leadership, and the only challenge with servant leadership, sometimes it puts people above the mission. And yes. I think if we do not accomplish the mission, we can't take care of the people. And so I think the mission is critical. And so I like the fact that you sort of label it that way. But I think it's, obviously we want to do everything in our best interest for the people, but the mission is really essential. We cannot create the company environment we want to create if we can't get the results we need to be able to create that environment.
It is to me one of the biggest things to wrestle with when, as a leader, you're asked to take cost out. Okay, well, that could impact jobs. Have people stay late, and then that affects their balance. And these are some of the really, really tough ones. And I as a leader that you have to make. And I love the comparison to servant leadership, because I know people who say, oh, I'm a servant leader. And I sort of challenge that as well. And I challenge it, and it really came through in that one semester that I was at Pepperdine. Dr. Kiernan was my professor. Incredible book that lays out every leadership style with the academics behind them, and it's a compendium in one book. It's brilliant. And
it's Nordhaus, probably, right?
It's Nordhaus. That's exactly the book. It's exactly the book.
Because I'm working on my PhD in leadership too. So,
okay, well, you know what? That's exactly the book.
Yeah.
And as we were going through it, it was so funny because at the beginning of the class, he stood up there and he says, "Okay, so what's your leadership style?" And I go, "Well, I'm an authentic leader, and I think I'm a servant leader, but I'm not sure. But I'm transformational." So I said, "I don't know which bucket I fit in." And this one other guy goes, "Oh, well, I'm clearly a servant leader." And he goes, "Really? Let's talk about this." And what he did was exactly what you were just talking about, which is, do you really know what that means relative to actions that you take? And then as we went through it, he goes, "Wow, I don't think I do. I'm not those things." So I think that's a very popularized view right now. And so when, I think you have to be purposeful. Like I spent real time writing down, what is my purpose in life? What are my core values? And then I said, what kind of leader am I? And what is my worldview? I mean, all that introspection. And where I landed personally for myself is authenticity. I love the book True North.
Yep.
And for that, I think those principles stand out: purpose, values, relationships, self-discipline, and heart. And those all lead to, passion and defined behavior, how you connect with people, how consistent you are, what compassion you lead with. So that hit home for me, those principles. But transformational, as I was thinking, am I just that? There wasn't enough in there, in my mind, that hit on things that I saw in the transformational leadership review. Things like guide using a North Star. Like, what is your vision? I've always said that. And again, without vision, the people perish. Set, expect, and communicate high standards. Crucial. And I learned that from the military. And by the way, I learned that from the discipline of football coaches and baseball coaches as well. And unfortunately, I don't see it as much today, at least in some of the levels that I see. But because again, I think there's some move towards sort of servant coach, which I think can really create not great behaviors. I think in encouraging creativity and innovative thinking, I think that's a crucial leadership principle that comes with that transformation. Demonstrating a really safe and caring environment. So this to me is really important. And Dr. Amy Edmondson at Harvard writes a book about a psychologically safe environment. And to me, that's how you're going to get the innovation, and you're going to identify. We had at an offsite, an astronaut, Mike Mullane, come and speak to us about the shuttle accident and how he uses this example that everybody knew that those O-rings weren't, at cold weather that the astronauts, like there was a lot of people that knew, but the information was suppressed because they needed to stay on schedule and it wasn't a psychologically safe environment. And he talked about that to my leadership team. So you've got to have a caring and safe environment. And then really it's, you've got to not only set the vision, but what are your goals and track results and reward people. So I was like, I think for me, I'm a combination between authenticity and transformational. And at least for me, that works, that I use that when I think about guiding an organization.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And again, I think probably similar to you, when I read through that book, it sort of opened my mind to different, because a lot of the stuff that you see in servant leadership has made it to mainstream press. It's some mainstream leaders, but there's so many other research that's out there that I wasn't aware of, and so I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And I didn't really think of it that way. So it's interesting you had the same sort of reflection as I did through that process. So one of the things I want to ask you, right now we're, post-pandemic supposedly, and we're in new territory. We have this situation where there's no longer like a stigma attached to job hopping, right? And a lot of people have left the workforce. They're doing the gig economy, especially people in the technology space. Why should I work for a big company? I can do it on my own. So my question to you is what is your strategy for retaining talent in this post-pandemic time where people are quitting, people are going into business for themselves. How do you keep your talent?
Wow, that's just another great question. I wish I had a prescriptive answer. I really don't. I always felt like, first of all, people do want to be a part of a team. I mean, there's some people that are just by definition would rather be alone than be with people. But most humans are mostly social animals, and I think being a part of a team that, again, you have a safe and caring environment. You have work that is challenging and interesting, and as best you can, because you can't always throw money or stock or whatever. As best you can, you reward those results. I can tell you this right now: people, money and compensation is a necessary but insufficient condition for people to stay. And they got to believe in the mission, in what you're trying to do. Like at Rackspace, we have a vertical for healthcare. We are 100% committed to helping the community, the healthcare community, provide care by us providing systems that are always up, that perform, that enable the doctors to do their job better by partnering with companies like Epic and others to really achieve that mission. And we are behind it. We also take care of fire and police services in certain jurisdictions. We take care of sovereign, nationwide services for certain. It's so believing in our mission. And I think there's missions like that in almost every company. You can find and take the time to communicate the mission. So if they're a part of a team, they feel like it's a psychologically safe environment, that the mission is inspiring. I mean, there's no more inspiring mission than the one you and I were in when the Cold War was still on and then ultimately ended. I can't think of a more important mission, and we didn't get paid hardly anything. And our enlisted troops got paid even less. I remember my master's degree program, I'd go and I'd learn about isochronous circuits or plesiochronous circuits. And I'd go back after class, it'd be like 10 o'clock at night. I'd go to the NOC, the Network Operations Control Center. I'd sit on the floor with the troops and I'd strip cables with them while they're teaching me, oh yeah, these isochronous circuits. And I'm like, wait, what did you just say? And they're like, yeah, well, this is when we do RS-422 communications links. They knew more than, frankly, the instructor, and they're sitting on the floor in their fatigues, in their BDUs, stripping cables, getting paid hardly anything, but serving their country. And so to me, that's a great example of a mission, a team, a family, and that trumped pay. So again, finding and retaining talent is really, really hard. And the only way I can feel that we can do that is by creating those environmental factors that make them want to come to work every day. Like if they're coming to work hating it, that's kind of on me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I love the fact that you pointed back to the military where the mission was very clear and you were motivated to do it because of the mission. And I think you can create the same thing in companies. And it sounds like you're doing it, which is phenomenal, which is
try.
Yeah.
Try.
Yeah. So one of the things before we kind of wrap up, you're also focused on a lot of humanitarian efforts. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you're working on these days.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I wanted to do, because we didn't really come from a lot, I got the Air Force paid for my undergraduate and for my first master's degree. And so the first thing is I sat down with my family. I've been married 35 years. I have 4 kids. And I really wanted to teach them this concept. Like when my father died, I was 9. My mother died, I was 19. And when, I was sitting there on the ground with the person she was kind of friends with, dating, whatever. And he said, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to drop out of school. I was a sophomore in college. And, I got a little sister. I gotta earn some money. And he goes, no, he says, you're the ace in the hole. Like you keep on. And he goes, well, what's your dream? And I said, what? And he goes, what's your dream? And I said, well, I always dreamed of going to Stanford. And he goes, have you seen it? And I said, no, I haven't. And he pulls out of his pocket about $200. Now, this was 1984 when my mom passed. And he goes, here, I want you to get on a bus, go down, and I want you to find a place near Stanford, and I want you to go walk the campus and talk to people, get a feel for it, and visualize it. And I was emotional. I'm getting emotional now. I said, I can't pay this back. $200 in 1984 was a decent amount of money. And he honestly said, don't pay it back, pay it forward. And when he said that in 84, I never, ever dreamed I would be at the place I was at now. And so when I sat down with my wife and kids and we had a family meeting to talk about what's our mission statement and what are the things that we believe in, like what does it mean to be a Lillie? What do we believe in? And what we wanted to do was help those less fortunate than us. And so we've created scholarships at multiple universities where I went, where my kids went, where my wife went. We created one at Tuskegee University at an HBCU. And it was all around one of the, you can't really define the requirements, but you can give some guidance. And every single one of them was around service before self, that we wanted people that were in service. And so, I think education is one area where we do a bit. And then when the Ukraine war broke out, I had built a development center in Poland, in Warsaw. And we had about 100 engineers, and I don't know if it was 15 or 20 were Ukrainian. And when that war broke out, I called up my friend who was, think about him as like the Chamber of Commerce for Poland, who had helped me move build this center. And I said, Tomasz, how are you? And he says, I need supplies. And so I just went around Silicon Valley and bought out as much medical supplies as I could. I jumped on a plane and I flew over there and we brought it to the border. And he had gotten it greased through everybody to let me just enter, the country with it. And that started I love Poland. I've been there a lot because of work and I have friends all over that amazing country. And that started an entire mission to help the refugees, in particular, the Ukrainian children. And so we've delivered probably 20 to 25,000 children's books to give them a little bit of home because, their culture is trying to be erased and language. And if they're away from home, if you could give them something to read in their native language with these beautiful, beautiful books written by Ukrainian authors, Ukrainian folk tales. They're beautiful, beautiful books. I've been doing a lot with basically refugees of the Ukrainian war. So, which it's still really, really hard to talk about what I saw. I ended up going into Kyiv, and now I'm working with the president of the American University of Kyiv to see, are there ways that we can bring interns to either the UK or the US, Ukrainian college students that are looking for internships. And so basically the youth, I'm trying to help.
No, that's fantastic. So it's interesting, the story, you begin with a lot of challenges in your life, and you find the military teaches you skills, you end up getting, through college, you end up learning leadership lessons. And now you end up in a place where you can give back, and you're giving back in a big way. And I think that's what we need to be doing as leaders is leading our teams well and giving back when we can. And I really, Brian, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey, because I think we all have learned something from your story. How can our listeners find out more about you and your company, Rackspace?
Well, so first of all, John, I have to say thank you, and thanks to everybody listening that has put on a uniform of any kind, the military, fire, police, civil servant. I mean, just anything where service is involved. If that's where you've given, I just want to say thank you to you and to your audience. So I'm just on LinkedIn, just Brian Lillie, Coach Lillie, I think is the thing. I'm on Twitter, and I try and publish things about authenticity and transformational leadership. And then the company Rackspace can be found at rackspace.com. It's really easy. But if you need anything or want to chat about leadership, one day I think I'm going to go back to Pepperdine. They were bummed when I left, and I was bummed when I left. But the Global Leadership and Change program there is excellent, and so I just want to say thank you, John.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your journey. And again, listeners, if you heard something that Brian talked about that really struck a nerve with you, or really got you thinking, we're going to have his links to his company, to his social media, including LinkedIn. Reach out to him, ask him a question. Say you heard him on the show and you heard maybe his story, you heard what he's working on in the Ukraine, and maybe you want to help. But reach out to Brian. That's why we have guests on the show, introduce you to great leaders like Brian, so we can learn the lessons, but also you can actually interface with him, learn, and reach out if you feel like there's something in there that he talked about that really resonated with you. Go ahead and reach out to him. He's happy to help. And Brian, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I learned a lot from you. I enjoyed hearing your story, and I really appreciate seeing great leaders in their element. And it's an honor to have you on the show.
Well, I can't thank you enough. Thank you. I'm grateful. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Welcome to Transforming 45, the podcast that celebrates the incredible power of passionate voices. I'm your host, Lisa Boat. Join me in conversation with heart-led humans who share their deeply personal stories of transformation. Transforming 45 is here to uplift, connect, and remind you that it's never too late to write your next chapter. So get ready to be inspired, empowered, and transformed. Join me in this community where through powerful storytelling, we heal and reclaim our inherent magic.
Electricast. Have you ever wondered what actually happens in Congress every day? Stay informed on Capitol Hill's daily happenings with a concise, factual summary of the Senate and House of Representatives' activities from the previous session, free from bias, on the Congressional Record Daily Digest podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and discover the process from the heart of U.S. politics. The Congressional Record Daily Digest, an Electricast production. Electricast.